Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me. This is Kathy, and today I'm sharing a mini slimline card. My original plan was to do a full slimline card, but when it got down to the end, I ended up making a couple of adjustments because I realized the new slimline connected rectangles die could be altered to create a mini slimline card very easily. So to start out, I started with the scratchy plaid background and I used yellow ink and stamped that onto a piece of cardstock that measures 3.5 by 8.5. Again, I was planning on doing a full slimline card, so that piece of cardstock is a little bit too big and I do end up trimming it down to 3.5 by 6 inches later on down the road. Next, I stamped the cute little Mariposa stamp using Memento Tuxedo black ink onto a piece of Cougar Super Smooth cardstock. And I'm not going to share all of the coloring, I'm only going to share how I colored her little face, mostly because I changed up the yellows that I would normally use for a butterfly or a bee, and because I did that, I changed up the color that I underpainted with. I started out with BV31 for my underpainting and added that in the areas where it would be the darkest shadows. So underneath the little flowers that are on her head, and then she's got this little tuft of hair on her forehead. So I added a little bit underneath there and then along the other side of her face as well. But it was a lot less on the opposite side because I wanted the shadows to be heavier on the left side of her face. After I was done with the BV31, I blended that out with Y38, and then I came in with Y35, and I'm going to finish up her face with Y32 and add some rosy cheeks with R20. And I will have all of the colors that I've used listed in the description box below for you. Now, the whole point of doing underpainting is to desaturate a color so that the shadows look a little bit more natural. And by doing the desaturation, the colors do appear to be somewhat muddy when you're first coloring it that way. But once the ink settles in, they just kind of all blend together. It'll still have sort of a muddy look, but once the ink really settles in, it looks just fine. So moving right along, I had die cut the Slimline connected rectangles die and decided that I wanted to change my card to be a mini slimline. So I just used my scissors to trim off the very top rectangle. I did make sure to pay attention to where I was cutting so that I didn't cut off that really thin rectangle, because I did want to have a thin rectangle at the top as well as at the bottom. I also die cut this die 4 times from heavyweight white cardstock, and then I used liquid glue to adhere all of those together. I did that just so that I could have a little bit of dimension on the front of my card, and I didn't really want to have to try and trim down foam tape to 1/16 of an inch wide. So that is why I just die cut it 4 times from cardstock and just glued them all together. Next, I needed to stamp my sentiment. So I put my stamped panel into my MISTI and I just placed the die cut frames on top just so I would know where I needed to place my stamp. I inked that up with VersaFine Onyx Black ink and stamped it, and I did stamp that twice just to make sure that I got a nice crisp impression. After I stamped the sentiment, I used liquid glue to adhere my now mini slimline connected rectangle die cut to the front of the scratchy plaid background. And then off camera, I had stamped and colored some of the flowers from the Beaucoup Bouquet stamp set, and I had run them through my scan and cut machine to cut them out for me. And the colors that I used for these flowers, as well as the greenery, are the same colors that I used on the little Mariposa butterfly. Once I had those elements arranged where I wanted them, I used liquid glue to adhere them to the frame. And it was after I adhered that very first stem that I realized it would be much easier to apply the liquid glue directly to my die cut frame, because then I didn't have to guess where I needed to put it on the back of my stamped image. So after I had all of those little pieces adhered in place, I put some foam tape down the middle of the back of my little Mariposa butterfly, just so that she would be popped up and would be flush with the Slimline connected rectangle die cut. I did add a little bit of liquid glue to the very end of her wings and her little antenna just to make sure that they stuck really well. Then I put liquid glue on the back side of that panel and adhered that to the front of my mini Slimline note card, which started out at 7 inches by 6 inches, and I scored it at 3.5 inches on the 7-inch side. So my finished card is 3.5 by 6 inches. And that finishes up my card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, we'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.